Well, good morning and welcome. Let me just make sure that you can hear me. If you can hear me, just put something in the chat box and say hi or good morning or afternoon, depending upon what time zone you're in. And I'll just wait and see. Okay, can you hear me? All right, I see people joining, so great. Oh, got a couple thumbs up here. Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to my Ask Me Anything Live on YouTube. I do these so that I can provide a way in which people can, frankly, learn from me, where I can share in a way that is more scalable. I have tried my whole career, frankly, to be accessible and to be able to share what I've learned and provide advice, etc. But as I've gained more and more responsibilities, I can't do that in a one-on-one environment anymore. So I started these live YouTube sessions as a way of saying, listen, I'll make myself available. I'll have topics for each one. But frankly, you can ask any question you want. It's meant to be an interactive session, and I hope you find it valuable. So I do have some questions that have come in, and I'll address those. But if you have other things that are on your mind, or if anything that I say sparks an idea, please just put it in the chat box, and I will try to monitor that and get to it. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me pull up the first set of questions here. Okay, so the topic for today is around career advancement. But as I said, if you have any other questions, feel free to ask them. So on career advancement, Shellye, any tips on how to talk to my boss about my career advancement? I find it difficult sometimes to find the correct language for this. I'm a woman and I'm struggling between being ambitious and at the same time not, quote, too bossy. Okay, so I'm a firm believer that everybody has the right to be ambitious. The key is how you channel that ambition and communicate. So it's an excellent question. How to talk to your boss about advancement? First thing, it's really important to be direct, but direct in a way that's non-threatening. So it's fine to have a conversation with your boss that goes something like this. I have aspirations. And then share what those aspirations are. You say, I want to continue to build my skills so that I can indeed advance in my career. My goal is one day to become, and then fill in the blank with what that might be. And if you don't even know what your ultimate goal is, but you have an idea of at least the next step or the next couple steps, it's okay to share those. So fill in the blank with what you're aspiring to do. And then say to them, I really value your perspective and advice, given your career and what you've accomplished. So what you've done is you've given them the opportunity to help you. You haven't gone in and, quote, demanded anything, right? And then you continue the conversation. So hopefully they will say some things. And whatever they say, then you come back. If they, for instance, suggest that, well, it would be good if you had more, I'll make it up, more experience leading larger teams, or that you were involved in more innovative ideas, or that you demonstrated more strategic, right, perspective, whatever it is that they suggest. It's don't just say, okay, and leave. No. Now that you've started the conversation, now's the time to make sure that you have absolute clarity before you leave their office. So if they're suggesting to you that you need more experience driving innovative projects, making it up, then say to them, that's a great idea. How do you suggest I put myself in the running to actually have that opportunity, right? Or are there specific areas that you think I should focus on, right? So what you want to do is continue to qualify and get clarity on what they say until you know very clearly in your mind what you need to do. And then once you've collected all their advice, make sure that you qualify, meaning you turn around and say, thanks so much for all your advice. Based on what you've said, given what I've done so far, that as long as I do X, Y, Z, that they've just suggested that you do, then I should be in a position to compete for that next opportunity, right? So what you want to do is let them know that you're listening and let them know that in a certain way you're holding them accountable because you've just asked them what you need to do. They've told you, and now you're coming back to say, okay, so this is what I need to do in order to get the next step. That way, when you come back and give them updates, which, oh, by the way, you need to do, right? Here's what you told me, right? 4 or 5 months later, here's what I'm doing. Does that map to what your expectations are? You do that throughout. And the reason you do that is when you've completed everything, it's now clear to you, but more importantly to your boss, that now you're ready. So make this a situation in which you and your boss are in essence working on this together. You kind of co-opt your boss by approaching it in this way. Okay? So that's that suggestion. I see one coming in on chat. Shellye, can you share what you did on a typical day in Zablet? There wasn't a typical day. When I took over Zablet, for those that don't know, Zablet was the company that was the precursor to MetricStream. And it was a company that was very broken when I was named CEO. So when you have a very broken company and you are fighting to have it survive and figure out the strategy to go forward, there is not a typical day. My focus was always on how do we manage our costs, basically reduce costs so I can have a long enough runway. How do I find a problem that we can solve as a company so that we can indeed start to grow our overall business? And then what skills and team do we need to be able to get it all done? So I would say that was the overriding focus that I had, but each day was actually very different. Okay, next question that came in. Can you provide ways of how to get out of middle management and move to leadership, director and above roles? I'm a top performer and I manage a team, but struggling to be selected for director roles. How can I show that I have potential? Think strategically and out of the box in my interviews. All right. So first, I'm going to back up a little bit because one of the things that people don't always realize is as you're moving up in your career, if you keep doing the same things you've always done, just better and better and better, it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to advance. Because as you move up throughout your career, different expectations exist for your capabilities. So for instance, when you're in middle level roles, right? Well, let me start at the beginning. When you're in early roles, early in your career, companies are looking to say, okay, are you a performer? Can you perform? Can you get the job done? Can you indeed manage your own, objectives and responsibilities? Do you work well with others? How's your attitude, right? It's that set of things. Then as you move up into middle level roles, they're looking for people who demonstrate strong management skill as well as personal accomplishments. They also want people who show the ability to build a team and know how to actually get work done, not just by doing it themselves, but getting it done through others. And that you have the ability to execute against the company strategy. So that gets you to middle. Now, as you're looking at what I'll call junior executive kinds of roles, well, junior executive kinds of roles, now what they're looking for, as you get to director, senior director, that kind of thing, they're looking for people who have the ability to not only manage a team, but actually design, shape, reform teams and organizations based upon what demands you have in the overall business. They're looking for people who can consistently demonstrate that they can get things done through others, right? So it's the ability to delegate, it's the ability to ensure that your team is firing on all cylinders, and it's the ability to anticipate and influence the company strategy. So understanding that as market dynamics change, as economic environments change, as situations change, that you also need to change and that you can contribute proactively in that dynamic. And then when you get to the very senior level roles, right, it's even more. So my point is, as you're going through, you need to not only continue to do a good job at what you're doing, but they're actually looking to see more and broader capabilities every step of the way. So my first suggestion, if you're struggling to get to that director level role or whatever that title is for the next senior role, first thing you need to do is make sure that people around you know you even want the role. People can't read your mind. It's amazing how many times people will come to me for advice to say, hey, they're really disappointed. They were hoping they would get this opportunity or that opportunity. And I say to them, well, who knew you wanted the opportunity? And I get these blank stares. Managers can't read your mind. You need to let them know what you're actually striving for. And by the way, not just your immediate managers, but other people around too. Because if you're in a company, many roles and opportunities are offered by others, not just your current boss. So you want people to know what you're actually striving for. Next, get feedback. And here's where you have to be vulnerable, right? People are a little concerned about doing this. But if what you're shooting for is that director role, then it's a fair conversation to have with your boss to say, I would ultimately like to compete for a director's role. I think I'm ready now. Do you think I'm ready now? And give them a chance to answer. If you get an S and you get a yes, terrific. Then you can ask them how they can help support you in doing this. But if you get a no or any kind of hedge, that's also a good thing. Now you might say, Shellye, why is it a good thing? I'm getting a no. Because when you get a no, it gives you the opportunity to ask questions and to actually find out what the issues are or what you need to do. So if they come back and say, no, I don't think you're ready, terrific. Then you say, okay, what do I not have? What have I not demonstrated? Or what are you not seeing that you would expect to see from a director candidate? And then give them a chance to tell you and write it down and make sure you're clear on what they're telling you so that you can come back and demonstrate it later, right? But now you have an action plan for how you actually get there. So next, make it easy too. And when I say make it easy, you'd be surprised how many people do not want to give feedback. It's just uncomfortable. So the best thing to do is when you're trying to get feedback is make it easy. And you make it easy by actually asking more specific questions, not a broad, what do I need to do? But you can make it easy if you're not getting the answers you want by saying, are there skill sets that you aren't seeing that you'd like to see, right? So you ask something specific. Or you can say, what can I do to make my communications even stronger, right? And I'm making it up. Pick things in terms of for yourself. So when they suggest areas to improve, dig down on it to understand exactly what you actually need to do. Now, here's the next part. Once they've given you the feedback, now you need to take it and actually start figuring out how to demonstrate it. And if you're not sure, then go back and have another conversation. You told me you want to see me act more strategically. But can you give me some examples of what you're looking for? Or maybe give me an example of someone, right, who is doing that I can aspire to. So it's okay to ask questions so that you understand what it is that you need to do. And here's a great chance also to leverage others, not just your manager, but mentors or other people that you look up to say, I'm aspiring to a director or to a vice president role. And Here are the things that I've been told I need to work on. I'd love your advice for the best way to approach it. So you don't have to do this on your own. But the keys are, 1, make sure people know what you want. And 2, ask people for feedback on whether or not you're actually competitive today to go after that role. And if not, why not? And then work hard to get those things accomplished. Okay, next one. Can you explain in detail how you found and established relationships with mentors in areas of your life, work, or faith throughout your career? How did you meet your mentors? What was something expected or unexpected that came out of the mentorships? How would you recommend someone do this who is looking for mentors in their late 20s? Great question. Mentors have played a huge role in my career. So I'm a strong believer in having mentors. Now I think of mentors in 2 categories. 1 are mentors that help you think about, strategizing for how do I build my career? What's the next step? Those kinds of things. But the area of mentors that a lot of people forget or don't think about are getting mentors who can help you do the job you currently have really well. Because until you actually ace your current job, it's hard to get the next job. So both types of mentors are helpful. And by the way, it isn't just one mentor. I had something happen to me when I was, probably 6 years into my career, something like that, whereby IBM, I was at IBM at the time, and they decided that their high potential employees should have mentors. So instead of assigning mentors, they asked each of their employees in this category, who would you like to be your mentor? So I was asked, Shellye, who would you like to be your mentor? And I put down a gentleman by the name of Roland Harris, who was somebody a couple levels above me, who I knew and I thought liked me. So I thought he'd be a great mentor. I put him down. Well, several days later, I got a call from Roland. He said, Shellye. And I said, Roland. He said, Shellye, you put me down to be your mentor. Now, he doesn't sound very happy. And I said, geez, Roland, I thought you liked me. He said, Shellye, you've got me. Go get somebody else. So what I learned from that conversation was you can have many mentors. And 2, a lot of times you actually have a mentor or access to a mentor and don't even realize it. So I learned from that point on to just start treating people like mentors. And in a way, I adopted them. So I didn't ask them, because a lot of people, if you ask, will say no because they don't have time. But if you just start treating them that way, sometimes you can actually adopt a mentor. And let me explain what I mean by that. Because you said share, specific details about how I did it. If I saw someone who I thought, they seem to really be on the ball and know what they're doing and show confidence and a lot of things that I admired, then I would try to ask them a really easy question. Something that not so easy that I should know the answer, but easy in that it doesn't take them any time to respond, right? I'll give you an example. At an event, somebody speaking, I thought they did a really good job of public speaking and keeping the audience engaged, etc. So afterwards, I'd go up and say, really enjoyed the presentation. I have a speech coming up in a couple of weeks. Is there one piece of advice that you'd give me? Now, typically people who speak, that's a pretty easy thing to answer. They'd either say, keep it short. They'll give some off the cuff kind of answer, right? Fine. But here's the key. The key is follow-up. So after your speech, you come back to them and say, thanks so much for the advice. My speech went much better than normal. Really appreciate it. Hey, oh, by the way, and then you ask another question. But the key for the first several questions is to keep them pretty easy, where they don't have to spend a lot of time, because if they spend a lot of time, they're not going to do it. But if it's off the cuff, they know it, they will respond. The key to you is to keep closing the loop. So several weeks later, come back and say, thanks so much for that advice. It really helped me, blah, 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 blah. Now, why do you do that? Because frankly, People, I think most people actually want to help and be helpful. So when you respond back, you let them know that they were actually helpful. You'd be surprised how many people never close the loop. So when they know that they were helpful and you did well, they get an intrinsic feeling of satisfaction. Wow, I was able to be helpful and it didn't even take much. Well, what starts to happen is they start to develop a relationship with you. And then in time, you can actually ask broader, deeper questions. Who knows? I've found that people even start to claim me as a mentee, even though we never had a formal discussion about them being my mentor. So my biggest advice is adopt mentors, just like that. And as I said, it's not just people who are ahead. Look for people who do the role that you currently have, maybe in other companies, in other areas. Now, how do you find them? Professional organizations, there's all kinds of groups, whether they're online or in person or what have you. You can always find professional organizations that have people that have your kind of role if you can't find them within your own network. The other way to find them is to ask people. You can ask people you admire. Hey, do you know something? If you're in product management, for instance, you can ask your boss or you can ask other people that you work with. Who do you admire that are really good product managers? I'd love to chat with someone in a different industry just to get some perspective, right? So you can get people to introduce you. So all those ways are different tips in terms of for getting mentors. But the key is, and I can't underscore this enough, you have to be a good mentee. You'd be amazed how many people over the years, even with me, right, are not good mentees. And a person who's not a good mentee is a person who doesn't close the loop, a person who only reaches out when they need something. You never know what's going on in between. And it's a person who doesn't take control, if you will, of the relationship. If you're the mentee, you need to set the agenda. You need to schedule the time. It's your job to communicate, not the mentors. So just a few tips. All right, I see the chat box moving, so let me take a look. Great advice on moving up. How can I ask for executive sponsorship for getting to the next level when I don't have an opportunity to work with leaders directly? Yeah, so sponsorship is an interesting one. You can adopt mentors, but sponsorship is different. You can't really ask people to sponsor you. Now, let me make sure I define these for you. I see mentors as people who help you, as I said, do the job that you have, give you advice, counsel, etc. But they're really advisors and more responsive than proactive. A sponsor is someone who has taken a vested interest in you and actually is proactively helping you, whether it's opening doors, creating opportunities, or if there's several levels up, hiring you. So those are sponsors. Sponsors you have to earn. I'm not seeing a situation where you can go up to somebody and say, hey, will you sponsor me? The only time I've seen that work is when you're actually having a conversation with, say, a skip level, and it's around career and career advancement. And you ask the question about whether they think you're ready for a particular role. And if they say yes, then you can ask for their help and their sponsorship to get the role. But those are very specific situations. The best thing I've found is sometimes mentors can turn into sponsors because they see you moving up. And if you are, again, a good mentee and you're giving them all that positive feedback back and they feel good about what they've done, then many times they'll want to lean in and actually help you in terms of sponsor. So that's the piece. Now, if you're in mid-level and you don't know executives, for instance, well, here's where, again, getting involved in professional organizations really helps, because a lot of professional organizations have people of different levels, especially if it's around a particular subject area. And that can give you an opportunity to actually interact with people at higher levels. And a good way to do that is, frankly, volunteer. So if you're part of a professional organization and they're putting together something major and, senior people are involved in leading it, volunteer to help. You can do that within your own company as well. So there are ways in which you can cross paths, if you will, with executives. It doesn't have to be directly in your own company. Think about it from an industry perspective. Next question. I see men are selected based upon potential and women based upon experience alone. What can women do besides meeting, exceeding goals to be selected based upon potential? Yeah, there's actually been studies on this that say that many men get opportunities because of their potential, whereas women, they want to see them actually prove it. Now, I wish I had the answer for how we change the dynamic in the world. I don't. But I do believe you can improve your odds. And that's what I've tried to do my whole career. What can I do to actually improve my odds? So the best way to improve your odds are, one, let people know what you aspire to do so they can actually help you. Be good at what you do. And three, help others. You know, one of the ways that I've been able to build frankly, a sizable group of supporters is by being helpful to them. I find by helping others and helping others achieve and or get done what they need to get done or solve problems, what have you, it gives people a chance to see the kind of person that you are. And in doing that, it helps them understand you more deeply beyond just what you get done in terms of your own work. It also tends to cause people to actually talk about you, right? Oh, do you know Atia? Yeah, I know Atia. Well, boy, isn't she great? She's always there when you need her. All right, that says dependability, right? Things people start to interpret when they hear things like that. So I found that actually helping people and volunteering for initiatives and things like that, great ways to both get broader exposure as well as start to build. Here's that overall reputation. Now, back to the job. Don't just work hard and assume somebody's going to just pick you blindly for the job. Sometimes that happens, absolutely. But if you want to improve your odds, you need to let people know what you want to do and what you aspire to. And then ask them when you're doing that, hey, would they be supportive of you? Now, why do you ask? Because it's hard, right? When you ask somebody a question, you can always get something back that you don't want to hear. So it's making yourself vulnerable. But you have to be vulnerable in order to actually get ahead. That is, I firmly believe that. So what is being vulnerable? It's nothing more than taking a risk. And studies also show people who take risks in their career advance further, faster. So taking risk is really important. And as I always like to say, risk and opportunity, risk and reward, two sides of the exact same coin. So you have to take risks to actually create opportunity. And the first risk you take is putting yourself out there to letting people know what it is that you want to do, and then hearing whether or not they think that's possible. And as I said, it's not a bad thing if they say they don't think it's possible. You ask them why. And then go solve whatever it is that was causing them not to feel that it was possible for you. All right, let me go back to questions on the list and keep them coming in the chat. Okay, here's one. I've worked corporate and fashion for some time, took on leadership roles in a startup and then started my own company. And I find myself in a place where I don't have many mentors. See, here we go, mentors again. Unfortunately, I've had some bosses who exhibited really bad behavior. And looking back, I asked myself, wondering where else I could have looked for mentorship. So we talked about a little bit. I talked about professional organizations. Depending on where you are, the other person was in their 20s, you can look for people who also went to the same school you did. Alumni groups are great groups to find people who can be mentors, as an example. But they're really all around you. People don't have to be doing exactly what you're doing to be a mentor. They really just need a base of experience rising in an organization, because organizational dynamics, yes, they vary company to company, but there's a lot of things that are actually very similar. So look in your industry, look in your profession, look at your alumni groups, right? Look at, frankly, friends. You can ask friends, do you happen to know anyone if you're in fashion, do you happen to know anyone in fashion who's, been out there for 15, 20 years that might be willing to have an informational conversation with me? I'm trying to learn a little bit more about the business, right? Simple ask, People may know people. You never know until you ask. Everybody has a network. The key is to use it. Your networks are your friends. Your networks are your family. Your networks are people at church or, wherever you spend time. All those people you know are all your network. So ask people who they might know and then use them to help make introductions. Not to say, introduce me to somebody so they can be a mentor. That's too heavy a lift. Instead, do you know somebody I can talk to just to learn more about the industry, more about their experience? Those are much easier conversations to set up. So make it easy. You can see there's a theme. All right. Next. All right, nothing in chat. All right. You have been deliberate. You've been deliberate in planning your career and advancement for yourself. But there must be moments that planning didn't work. What is one decision you wish you didn't make? Yeah. So, this is a really interesting question because, like everybody, did I have roles that, man, I wish I didn't have? The answer is yes. But at the same time, I've learned something from everything I've done, no matter how difficult it's been. So it's hard for me to say, looking back, what job did I wish I didn't take or what decision did I wish I didn't make? Because while I would rather have missed that hard experience, I know I've built on the learning that I gained from it to develop to who I am today. So my candid answer, and I know it sounds so pat, but honestly, it's true. I am very pleased with where my career and my life has taken me thus far. And I do believe that one step begets another. So that if I change something, a job, a decision, a move, whatever it might have been, that it would have changed the trajectory in some way. So looking back, I actually wouldn't change anything. Were there things that I wish I hadn't done? Yeah, if I could have avoided it. I moved my family from Japan to Dallas for a job at Blockbuster. Well, it turned out the job was not what I expected. And I was in the job for a year. Well, after that, I moved to Silicon Valley for another job. Well, that would have been whipsawing my family, taking my kids out of school and the whole bit. So I ended up commuting from Dallas to Silicon Valley for 3 years. Now, do I wish I didn't have to do that? The answer is, yeah, I wish I didn't have to do that. But at the same time, I learned things at Blockbuster that I've totally leveraged. So anyway, that's why, tough question to answer. Okay. Here's an interesting one. What's the most dangerous trait in a leader's career? I think the most dangerous trait is when someone is not authentic. When someone is trying to be who they think others want them to be. Because the danger here is it is impossible to be something that you're not all the time. So eventually, your real persona, approach, communication style, whatever it is, will show through. And when it does, well, people will realize you're not authentic. And if you're not authentic, you're really hard to trust. And a leader that cannot develop trust among peers, among employees, among their overall community, it's really difficult to be successful. So I think not being authentic is probably one of the biggest risks to actually building a strong career. Okay, a couple other questions. Shellye, in senior leadership roles, your success depends on how you lead others. It's your ability to influence. How do you develop a great team and what do you delegate? Okay, pretty broad question, but you're absolutely right. As you move up, especially your ability to build a team, to lead the team, and to have the team execute is absolutely how you're being measured, much more so than on just what you personally are able to do. So how do you develop a great team? First, you have to know yourself. part of building a good team are bringing people on your team that complement your own skills and fill in the gaps. So that's one. If you hire everybody who's just like you, then you're going to leave some big gaps, and it's going to make it hard for your team to execute well. Two, you want to bring people on your team who bring different perspectives to the table and different experiences, because studies after studies show that people who bring different perspectives, different viewpoints, and come together on a team, they just outperform over time because they just think more broadly and more innovatively. Three, you want to make sure you have a no asshole rule, right? You don't want to bring people on your team that are actually going to do something that really messes up the dynamics, the camaraderie, the teamwork, what have you. What else in terms of team? You want to make sure that you're bringing people who not only will be good team players, but will also be accountable for what they need to get done. Now, how do you delegate? So delegating is a skill that is super important as you rise. Because frankly, as I said earlier, you get judged as you move up more on how effective you are at getting work done through others, which is delegating, than you are in what you actually do yourself. So delegating is key. In a couple of words, what I'll tell you is the keys to being a good delegator are: one, clarity. You need to make sure that the people you're delegating to understand what you need, when you need it by, in what format, right? What your expectations are, so that they don't waste time and you don't waste time. Two, the key is to tell people what outcome you require, not how to do it. Now, you can provide advice and guidance, if asked in terms of how to do it. But in essence, you want people to be able to learn. And if you're telling them what to do and how to do it, they're not learning. And if they're not learning, then you're not doing a good job developing your team. And you're never going to be able to do more than what you're currently doing. Because the only way you're able to do more with the same set of people is if everybody is actually growing and expanding their capabilities. So those would be a few things I'd offer on delegation. Okay, next. Please provide some tips for salary negotiation for growth. Okay, so with regards to salary, first, you have to know what you're worth, and you have to know what the job that you're in is worth, so that you have an idea of what is reasonable to request and to negotiate. So do your homework. The good news today is you can figure it out in terms of what salary ranges are. Look at where you are. And if you feel that you're being underpaid for the job that you're in, then you need to have a conversation. Now, how does the conversation go? You don't walk in and say, I need a raise because you're underpaying me, right? Because that is a bit too aggressive and you're probably not going to get the response that you want from your boss. Instead, you have a conversation that says, I wanted to do a check-in. How am I doing in my current role? You've asked me to do blah, 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 right? These are my outcomes. Here's what I've done. I would just like to get some interim feedback, because I'm assuming this is happening not on a regular feedback cycle. I'd just like to get some interim feedback on how you think I'm doing. Now, why do you have to ask that first? Because if they come back and tell you that they actually don't think you're doing a good job, then you don't ask anything in terms of salary, because you're not going to get it. But you want to have them on record saying that, yes, you're doing a good job, they're pleased with your performance, right, et cetera. So then when they say that, you can say, well, thank you, I'm glad to hear it, because there's actually something I've been meaning to talk to you about. And then you say, I'm concerned about my salary. I've done some research, and frankly, I think I'm not paid commensurate with my contribution. And I want to talk to you about how we might be able to rectify that. So now what you've done is you haven't made a demand, you've identified an issue, and you've asked them for help. All that approach is a much more open and welcoming kind of approach. Now, your boss is still going to feel on the spot, but at least you've done it in the best way possible. Now, they may say something, right? And then you respond. But the key here is saying, they might say, well, why do you feel that way? Right? And then you share some of your data points and knowledge and why you feel that way. They might say, well, let me look into that. Right? And if they say that, then you say, thank you, I would appreciate it. When do you think we can talk about this again? Because here's what tends to happen. Bosses will say that as a way of basically deflecting you and hoping that they can say it and leave it open-ended. So maybe it'll be months before they have to come back. Well, honestly, it doesn't take that long to look into it. So it's fine to say, oh, thank you, I'd really appreciate that. When should we circle back? You want to put a timeline on it. Then they might say, there's so many ways in which they can come back. But the key is to always keep it bound, either bound by time when they'll come back and have a discussion, or by what they're going to do, right, etc. But don't, try hard not to put so much pressure that it makes them not want to help you. You want them to leave that meeting wanting to help you, because they're the ones with the power. Okay. Next, let's see. My opinion on MBA versus continuing to work and network on your own. Unfortunately, from an MBA standpoint, that's too broad a question for me to answer. Do I think everybody needs an MBA? The answer is I don't. Do MBAs bring value? They absolutely do. So much of it depends upon what industry in, what role you're researching, how many years out of school you are, in terms of having that kind of perspective. In certain industries, they really value it. If you're in, finance, investment banking, a CFO, those kinds of things, people like MBAs. So not having one can diminish your prospects as you get higher up. Other areas, it's not so important. It's not something that's in the job description when they're looking for people. So my big advice here is look at people who have the roles that you aspire to be in. And it's easy to do on LinkedIn. And just look to see, well, how many of them actually have MBAs versus not, right? Talk to people who actually are in the kinds of roles you aspire to, or hire the roles that you're aspiring to, and ask what they think, right, for their particular industry. So industries play a role. The job you want or don't want, that can also play a role. And also, how far out of school you are can play a role personally. The longer you've been out of school, typically the higher the opportunity cost is. And what I mean by opportunity cost is going back to school, whether you decide to go full-time and forgo your salary, or even if you're going part-time, you're still paying a cost of either not being able to work or of time away from job and whatever else is important to you in terms of getting it done. So you have to weigh it. So look at the roles that you're interested in ultimately, see whether most people have MBAs or not. And two, talk to people that are in your role, in your industry, and get their perspective. Because it's really a case-by-case decision. I don't have an overall view on MBA. All right, next. Shellye, if someone wasn't as intentional as you and are in their late 30s and realize they want to be CEO of a great company, what advice would you have for them? It's never too late to plan. I tell my kids all the time, they're going to live to like 150 because the way medicine is going and the fact that my grandmother lived to 105, we have amazing genes. So think about it. If you're going to live to 150, well, let's say 120, you're probably going to work until you're well into your 80s. You still have plenty of time. And I'm only half kidding. Still plenty of time. So put a plan in place. If you want to be a CEO of a company, wonderful. Look at where you are now. Look at CEOs. Figure out what industry. I assume you have some experience in a set of industries. It probably makes sense to build on that experience and stick with that industry. Look at what people have done. Figure out what roles you need to aspire to and how you go get it done. But as far as I'm concerned, it's never too late to plan. I know people who have gone back to college in their 50s. And had great careers. No matter what you think of Nancy Pelosi, she didn't even start into politics until she was in her 50s. And she rose to be Speaker of the House. So it is never too late to plan. So set a goal, figure out what needs to be true for that goal to happen, and then put a plan in place to make it true. That's how I've approached my whole career. What do I want? Fine. What's needed for that job or that role or that whatever it is? And then how do I make it true that I actually end up with that experience or that background or that opportunity? So that's my advice. And let me go back to the questions submitted, and then we'll be wrapping up here, folks, in the next 5 minutes or so. So any last questions, please add them. What 3 books can you recommend on career advancement? Okay, well, this is a slam dunk because the first one is going to be mine. For those of you that aren't aware, it's right back there in the window. But I'm the author of Unapologetically Ambitious, Take Risks, Break Barriers, and Create Success on Your Own Terms. And it's available on October 6th, but it's available for pre-order now. And if you think you're interested at all, please pre-order because it means a lot more for a new author. So I would appreciate it. But obviously that book talks about everything I've shared about here, how to improve your odds for achieving what you want by being intentional. And I talk about the strategies, approaches, how do you overcome different barriers? I talk about imposter syndrome. I talk about managing bad bosses. Anyway, lots of stuff in there to help. So that's 1. 2, there's a book by Wayne Baker called All You Have to Do Is Ask. And it's a great book to help you figure out how to ask for what you want. You know, many of the questions coming in today were all about how do I ask? How do I negotiate? How do I do this? So I recommend that book. And 3rd, you know, negotiations plays a key role in any career. So there's a book called How You Can Negotiate to Succeed. But hang on, that's not what it's called. It's called Getting More. Getting More by Stuart Diamond. And the subtitle is How You Can Negotiate to Succeed in Work and Life, or something like that. So those would be my 3 recommendations for career advancement. Okay, last question, and then we're going to wrap it up. And that just came in. Any advice for an introvert who wants to get promoted and people say you're not visible enough? You know, the real difference between an introvert and extrovert is really where you get your energy. An introvert can still be someone who speaks and shares. You know, now sometimes it's shyness that prevents people from doing that. And here's what I would tell you. It's what I said earlier. It's all about risk. Typically, the reason you don't speak more or become more visible is it's a risk and you're scared. So the best way to build that risk muscle, which is really courage, is practice. It's practice. So start small. Set some goals for yourself. Okay, in the next meeting, I'm going to make 1 comment. Just 1 comment. And then do it. And oh, by the way, tell somebody that you work with that you're going to do it. By doing that, somebody else can help hold you accountable. So my biggest advice for introverts is start practicing taking risk. The more you do it, the easier it'll become. Not that it will ever be easy, but the easier it will become. All right. Hey, everyone. This wraps up time. Thank you so much for participating. I encourage you to follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. If you've liked what you heard today, please post about it so that others can see that there's value in these sessions. All right. Thank you so much again, and we'll see you next month on Ask Me Anything. Bye-bye.